A lot of foreigners who date Korean men for the first time, they all say they are love bombed. They are literally, they have never felt this kind of treatment anywhere in the world. They feel like princesses. They're like, wow, this guy is ready to like do everything for me. I was having a very, very important meeting, and the meeting went on for 3 hours. And then after that, we got into a fight because she said, why didn't you text me for 3 hours? And I was like, I was in a very important meeting. And then she was like, but did you not go to the bathroom one single time? And then I was like, yeah, of course I went to the bathroom. And then, well, did you not have fingers?
What do Korean men think of foreign women? Let's start with, let's say, American women. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dating Beyond Borders podcast. Today, we're diving into a country that's made headlines with its beauty products, boy and girl bands, and melodramatic series, a country so many people are obsessed with. And yes, you guessed it, we're talking about Korea. I'm thrilled to welcome David Kim, the host of the podcast Korean Pizza Club, to the show. We'll be exploring the Korean dating scene, discussing why Korea now has the lowest birth rate, talk about what skinship is and when to expect it in a relationship, and what you need to know before going on a first date in Korea. Welcome, David.
Hello, Marina. Thank you for having me on the podcast. Glad to be here.
Thank you for coming on. I love your podcast. I love the different perspectives I get to hear about the Korean culture. Korea is not a country that I know a lot about, so I'm actually genuinely excited to learn a little bit more from you today. So for anybody that's listening to this or watching this, tell us a little bit about yourself. You were born in the U.S., moved to Korea when you were younger, right?
Yes. Because of my parents' profession, I had to move to the U.S. with them when I was 3 years old. And then I stayed in Baltimore, Maryland for 7 years. And I came back to Korea when I was 10 years old. And then ever since, I've been living in Seoul, South Korea.
Very cool. So you get a little bit of both perspectives here. I mean, obviously more in the Korean perspective since you've lived there most of your life. But tell me, like, for foreigners that are coming to Korea, is there anything that would kind of shock them about the culture itself first?
Just in general, you mean, right? Not
just in general, yes.
Well, first of all, I'm in the States right now when I'm recording this. So I'll tell you a reverse culture shock. So that might apply for foreigners as well. So the small talk here is really, just weird to me. So if you come to Korea, whether it be the subway, the elevator, or just in your residence or wherever, when you meet a person, they will not say hi to you. They will not greet you. They will not do anything, or it's just going to be very, very silent. So if you can't stand that awkwardness, that's going to be a little bit weird for you. Vice versa for me here. Every time somebody says like, how you doing? Good morning in the elevator, it gets very weird for me. So that's one thing you might, get weirded out of.
Yeah. Small talk gets a lot of people. The Americans are renowned for their small talk. In Korea, you don't talk to people you don't know, right?
Yes. They're basically like strangers. We might do like head nods, like slightly, but that's just about it. Yeah.
There's also a big thing that I heard when it comes to like respect is a big part of the culture, right? Like, even when apparently like you're passing things to someone, you should use both hands. Is that true?
That's true. So because we have roots in Confucianism, and respecting your elders or other people is very important. Such as you can just bow at people when you're greeting them. You can pass over the plates with two hands. You have to pour soju or like liquor with two hands as well. You can't eat before the most elder person in the table gets his first spoon. Stuff like that. Yeah.
Interesting. There's like one study that I really love. They did a study between like American kids and Asian kids, and they showed them a fish tank. I don't know if you know of this one, but like the American kids, when they showed them the fish tank, they were like focusing on the biggest fish and they just talked about that one fish. But when they showed it to Japanese and Korean kids, they were like, oh, look at the seaweed and the rocks. And so it was like really like all about like balance and harmony, like how everything works together, which
that's true.
I don't know if you feel the difference coming to the US.
Yeah, it is. I feel like, there's a lot of individualism here. It's very self-centered in a good way, I would say. Like there's a lot of self-expression. People like to ask questions, like voice their opinions. And I think that is a mentality that Korea should learn and adopt in the long run as well. But in Korea or Asian countries, they're more like conformed. They want to like mix in with society. They're like, they don't want to stand out that much. They want like a stable, just, easygoing life. So I think that's a big difference for sure.
All right. Well, I really want to dive into the deep end like right away.
Okay, let's do it.
So we'll go with it. So Korea is now officially the country with the lowest birth rate, down by 50% from the last decade. Actually, that was the stats that I saw before checking out your podcast, and you also confirmed it in your podcast. What have you learned, like, with your thoughts on this? Have you kind of realized why that might be?
Yeah, so as you said, I think the birth rate is like around 0.6 or something around that number, and that is a national disaster. Like the government has officially established a new department to tackle these problems, and they're throwing out money and subsidiaries and all these policies to just solve this. But in like the individual levels and dating relationship terms, I think before we even get to that, like the economy is just so bad. Like the housing prices are just too high, the living costs, or just in general, raising a child, the education costs, all of that just pile up. And it's just overwhelming the younger generation with their wages, with their jobs. They cannot reach that. You would have to just save up 10 to 15 years of your own salary without spending a dime to get a house. So if you don't have a roof, how are you going to actually like make a family and like raise a baby? So definitely, I think the economy and the housing prices, all of that is just driving this whole thing, into like a terrible situation. And also, I would say this, you haven't been to Korea, but basically everything is very centered towards Seoul. It's the big metropolitan city, and there are like 10 million people living there in such a small city. And because of that, the infrastructure, the jobs, the opportunities, the entertainment, all of that is just centered there. So that's why everyone wants to flock to Seoul to live there. And that's just driving up the prices even more and more and more. So it's kind of like New York, I would say, if that's a good comparison. So because the only option they have is Seoul and the vicinity, people are getting a more and more hard time to just like settle down and have like an easy life and make a family and all that. So I would say those would be like the two macro kind of reasons. But in the micro level, definitely there is struggles about like, gender conflicts, all that kind of stuff. There are radical feminists versus, very conservative males in Korea. So because like these new forms of mindsets are just flowing in from the Western world or wherever, these traditional versus new progressive mindsets are just clashing. So those kind of things are also like just sparking up the problem. Yeah.
So what you mean is that men are still more conservative and women are starting to be more feminist? Is that what you mean? Or there are some women that are like that?
There are definitely, as I said, I just claimed it as radical feminism because, not all feminists are bad. I support feminism as well. But because like the media just exposes and highlights the radical feminist side, which their methodologies or whatever can be pretty intense. And that just paints a bad picture on the women's side and all. And then that just makes like gender conflicts and wars between the two, especially on online communities. So I have to just clarify, in real life, if you go in Seoul to a park, you will see hundreds and thousands of couples just hugging each other, grabbing hands, and, having their best life. And that's the most cutest thing ever. And a lot of my foreigner friends say, like, when I'm traveling in Korea or living here, I feel the most lonely. I feel like the most lonely creature on the planet. So yeah, don't get me wrong. Like Korea is fine with like the dating culture and everything, but on the internet, it just seems like that. And like a minority or a group of people might have that kind of thought. And that might be like, just compiling over the years, that kind of sentiment, and it might be affecting the relationships and the birth rate. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. By the way, I totally agree with you on, equality versus radical feminism, which is just unnecessary, in my opinion. I mean, too many things that are just wrong with it. And I do think that a lot of people that never actually go on dates and are just online the entire day, which I can see would be an issue for Korea as well. I know it's a huge one for Japan.
Yes.
And those people would never actually meet a real life woman, but what they see online is those radical feminists, like talking about toxic masculinity and don't do this, don't do that.
Yes.
And so, of course, those guys become bitter and hateful, and then they project that, on the women. And then it's like the hate between the sexes is a really big thing. And I'm noticing this really all around the world, like even in more conservative places, like Mexico.
Yeah.
Like men talk about that as well. Like women, they're like extreme now, but you're right. It's like if you go out in the real life, you don't see that as much as you see that online.
That's true. And also, just to be fair for the women's side, of course, you mentioned the word toxic masculinity. That definitely exists in Korea as well, because as I said, the patriarchy is really, firm here. And then we have a Confucianist background where like men were, tend to be superior or whatever to the women. So that still passes down by. And I think the younger generation, it's been diluted and, there's like a lot of equality among the younger generation. But still, if you go up to like my parents or my grandparents' generation, they still have like this fixed thought of like different roles in gender and all that kind of stuff. So that just passes down, trickles down, and it's just in society. So yeah, that kind of stuff.
It's interesting that you mentioned like this toxic masculinity in Korea. Whenever I think of Korea, I think of like kind of the metrosexual gentlemen,
yes.
And so it's interesting to kind of hear the both sides, right? You've talked about this on your podcast, which I really enjoyed, is that like there's this attraction towards this like gentle masculinity, which is the epitome of Korean culture.
Yes.
But you also mentioned that it's also like quite actually like male dominated culture as well still, or is it changing?
Yes, as I said, it is changing. There's equality here. There are policy improvements towards women and all that. But as you said, the soft masculinity is the look and is the trend that is going on here. It's like the K-pop stars you're seeing, BTS, or the K-drama stars with all the long coats and all that. So that is an image, but it is somewhat of a representation, maybe an extreme representation of what the guys here are trying to pursue in terms of looks and, manners and all that. But it's like I think it's like a double coexisting situation where the older generation's thoughts are just like still lingering there, and the appearances have just evolved into like a different kind of thing. So while the appearances might be like that, men would still have, sometimes some men would still have, very men-centered, male-centered kind of thoughts. And they would still think, some people might take it in the good way, but it's like males need to provide, I need a housewife, I need someone to cook for me, that kind of stuff. So I think that is just the status quo, and it's changing rapidly right now. It's becoming very more, I would say, westernized and going for equality. So yeah, I'm observing that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know that I don't have the numbers here, but I know a lot of Korean women work. Like a majority of Korean women actually work nowadays, right? So maybe that's another reason that like women are kind of now taking on those roles, and that's fairly new to Korea. And that's why it's kind of changing that, right? Like people are working really hard their whole day. Women are not so eager to have kids, which again is a thing around the world. But really, I mean, like East Asia, like it changes really, really fast. Like the way you guys live in the future, right? So it really, like the changes happen extremely fast. It feels like to us in the rest of the world. Is it now like actually more than Japan? Because I always thought Japan was the lowest on the birth rate and like the marriages and all that. Is it now taking over Japan? Yes, Korea is officially number one. It's a very bad spot to be in. Yeah. Wow. Any thoughts on like why is it taking over Japan? I always thought Japan was the extreme case of like they have more adult diapers than they have actual baby diapers. Yeah. I can't pinpoint anything, but as I said, aforementioned reasons such as like everything concentrated in Seoul, the housing prices going up, the economy going bad, gender conflicts, all that adding up. And also, I think it's because of the speed of the economy or the country in general, just advancing. Like 100 years ago, Korea was, it wasn't modernized. And we just, caught up with the global standards right now. And we're just like making companies like Samsung, Hyundai, LG. And if you come to Korea, as you said, some people describe it as the future. There's so much new technology, but the discrepancy between the mindsets and the advance of technology and the wages and all of that, it's just like making a whole imbalance. And
I think that would be the reason why people are like, oh, we've advanced this far. I have this career. I'm making this much. I can just live by myself comfortably. I can't afford a house. So, and then there's like gender roles, like clashing and all that. So it's like a mix of everything, and you can't really pinpoint on anything, but just because of the speed of like how the society is advancing, like technologically and like economically, I think that is like one of the big factors. Yeah.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a second to thank you all for tuning into this podcast. These podcasts take so much work, so any of your support is much appreciated. If you have a second, please go and give it a follow and a 5 stars if you really enjoyed it. Now, back to the episode. Now, talking about relationships, in quite a lot of the world, I think things are becoming very liberal in a sense that people are not searching for committed relationships as much, which in my opinion is a big problem because I think we're meant to be connected to someone,
Yes.
to be with someone. How do you feel that's happening? I mean, like when it comes to Korea, based on the people that you know and the people that you talk to in your podcasts, do you feel that's also kind of true, or still people are like looking for more long-term relationship?
I think it's half-half. So definitely for the younger generation, they've been exposed to dating apps, and they just want to date around, have fun, meet as much people as they can. And the dating scene has become a little bit more lighter. But definitely the mass majority, I feel like they are still, heading towards the goal of marriage at the end. It's pretty serious, but the conditions are just not met, their wages and the housing prices and all that. So I think it's like an inevitable change that society has just, put upon these people that want to date seriously. So whereas, as I said, the younger generation is it's very divided between the two generations. And there's a example I always talk about when this subject comes up. So there's a Korean term called 자만추. It's like 3 letters. And that means, it's an acronym for like a very long word. So the first meaning would be like, I would like to pursue a natural, setting to meet a person. That means like you would like to bump into someone in the library, or just like, you meet your coworkers, or you're at a running club or whatever. And then you get interested into a person and meet that person. And then it develops into a nice relationship. So that was the meaning of the word 자만추 in the past. But nowadays it has changed. The acronym meaning has changed into let's sleep first and then pursue a relationship. So it's the same word, but the acronym itself has changed within the meaning. So people are like, okay, we need to test out our compatibility in bed. That's a very important thing. There's no shame in that. So let's try it out. So the younger generation has changed that meaning. And so it's the same word, 2 different meanings. I think it's the prime example of showing like how divided like the generations are in thinking. Of course, there are like crossovers, but yeah, that's how it is.
That's very surprising to me. I didn't expect you were going to say that, because that's for me, that's actually like a Northern European thing where people have sex first and then it's a very pragmatic approach. It's like, let's see if we're compatible in this way.
Yes.
And then see if we actually even want to get to the relationship, but we're just going to be sleeping until that next step. But speaking of sex, I mean, intimacy is something, so you're saying like a lot of people now are just sleeping right off the bat. Like that's changing really fast as well with the younger generation. Was it different before? Like did Koreans typically wait longer to have sex?
For sure. Because Confucianism keeps on coming up because, it's deeply embedded in our roots, and we have to be very conservative, traditional. It's very family oriented. So having sex before a marriage was typically kind of shamed upon. It was not favored. So a lot of people thought, not to the extent of like not having sex before marriage, but at least once we're sure that we're in a serious relationship, let's wait until then. So that used to be the case. And, in like, I think a decade ago or 2 decades ago, a lot of people thought like that, and they waited for like, I don't know, 100 days or, like their own metric of like, okay, we are boyfriend and girlfriend. We are serious about this. I'm willing to, go in bed with you. So that was the case, but definitely nowadays people have become more liberal. They're like, just more free, and they're like, it's my own body. I can do whatever I want. There's no shame in it. And the societal, atmosphere has become a little bit more lax about like sexual relationships. So the younger generation, they're like, going to pubs, clubs out there. And like, if they meet someone they, click with on the night, they could go to like a love motel and, have love and stuff like that. And then after that, they'll be like, so what are we like? Are we meeting or not? And then they'll be like, okay, let's try it out. Let's try, texting, go on a few dates. And if it happens, it happens. So yeah, I think there's a very big cultural shift that is changing right now. Yeah.
How do you personally feel about each one?
I think, everybody has their own perspective, and it's totally fine. This side, I can respect that. The younger side, I can respect that. But I do think that, one side should not be shaming the other. So like, obviously the conservative side would be like, oh, these people are just like, then they're just like sleeping around. That is not good. That will get you in bad places. And they label you as like a very bad person. So I don't think that is like a good approach, definitely.
Okay, very interesting. Now, let's kind of backtrack into like how, let's talk about dating apps, actually.
Okay.
I don't know if you personally use dating apps or, a lot of people that use dating apps. I wonder if there's anything different about dating apps in Korea as well, because I know in Japan, the emphasis is very serious still.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so people still put like what they're looking for in terms of like even how much money should someone be making, or the specific job that they have. Like those things are like really important in Japanese dating apps. But I know nothing about Korean dating apps, so enlighten me.
So there is a very bad stigma upon dating apps in Korea to like the Korean people. A lot of people are very shy about using dating apps because of the image that follows them. And I don't think it's anything necessarily bad, but it's just the conservative society making that image. So, for example, Tinder, people would go on Tinder, and mostly men would look only for sex. It would be like, there have been so many cases I've heard from my foreigner friends or like just female friends that if they go on Tinder, obviously they're going to get like a million matches. And then like 90% of them will send you, without any context, FWB, ONS. They wouldn't even say hi to you. And they would like, even if they were like decent and say hi, like my name's what, and then do you want to meet? They go to the stage, like they skip all the stages and say, do you want to come to my house? So there are so many of these like examples and anecdotal evidence that has just piled up and kind of tarnished the image of dating apps in Korea all in all. So people are very reluctant to use it. So what I've observed is either you've been to the US or like you've been to the other countries in the world, and you're a little bit more open-minded about like using dating apps. So those are the people who are using it. Like actual Koreans who have lived here and want to pursue serious relationships do not, stay close. They stay away from dating apps. They are definitely not looking for anything serious there. There might be hidden gems, but it's very, very hard to find. And I'm very surprised Japan is approaching like that, because like it's totally different in Korea. Yeah.
But then if people don't meet on online dating apps, or if there is a stigma around dating apps, how then do people meet each other?
So as I said, the word before, 자만추, the word itself popped up because they were like, oh, I don't want to meet someone in an artificial setting like a dating app or anything. I want to meet someone romantically, like at the bus stop while it's raining, like someone lends you your umbrella.
Hey, series.
Yeah, too much K-dramas. But yeah, it's either that, like I would say everyone wants to meet organically, romantically, or either they go to these specialized services like matchmaking services. They're a little bit more serious than just dating apps. Dating apps don't have a paywall, right? Anybody can go on it and you can look for whatever you want. But these matchmaking services are actually very targeted towards people who are very, very serious approaching marriage. So they have like, price tags, they have plans, services, all of that. And they like, you can set like so many filters. Like I want someone who earns 6 figures, who's over 180 centimeters, who lives in Seoul, who has this kind of car, who has this profession, all that kind of stuff. And they will find a person like that for you. And then they set up like blind dates, or no, not blind dates because you get the picture before, but they set up the dates and then you try to meet them. And then if it doesn't work out, they give you more and more options. And it's very pricey. So I would say that is one of the big options. And other than that, people just ask their friends to introduce their friends. So that's the nice old fashioned way. Yeah.
I like how you mentioned meeting each other at a bus stop when it's raining. It's very, very case series. But do you feel like that's like those series have had kind of an influence in how people view like dating and relationships? Like the romanticized version of it all, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so definitely K-drama is huge in Korea. It's like Korea is the home of romanticism in this era, I would feel. That's why I hear a lot of foreigners are attracted to it too. But yeah, the media definitely just portrays and enforces that kind of, pursuit of romanticism within like relationships as well. So there are things like women would, expect guys like chivalry or like well-mannered stuff, paying for the first meal, all that kind of stuff. And then guys would expect girls to have like aegyo, which is like acting cute or, being like kind of feminine, all that kind of stuff. And it's all a cute dynamic, I would say. And definitely people are looking for some kind of romance. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned chivalry. I mean, do you feel like there's a big focus on those like old school like gender norms and like the man opening the door, the man taking your jacket off, I don't know, opening the car door. Maybe that's the extreme case. Do you think that there's like a big focus on that?
I'm glad you mentioned that because like the K-drama point I was talking about, how like the exposure of that is just, displayed in real society. That's actually, I think it's not even a focus anymore. It's just embedded in our bodies. So a lot of foreigners who date Korean men for the first time, they all say they are love bombed. They have never felt this kind of treatment anywhere in the world. They feel like princesses. They're like, wow, this guy is ready to like do everything for me. So even for myself, there's like a formula online or in K-dramas how men are supposed to act in a romantic way. As you mentioned, like take off their coats, pull out their chairs, like offer the inside seat, take them home every day, open the door for like the taxi and all that kind of stuff. So like that is just very naturally embedded in our genes at this point. So everybody's just going to act like that way. But in the foreigner's point of view, that is very, very gentlemanly. So yeah, for us, it's like we would do that to anybody. And that's how we're like educated by K-dramas for us to act. Yeah.
I always find it very interesting when like certain cultures have like a strong like soap opera culture, like the Turkish people or Mexicans. And I always wonder like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like was it that the dramas educated the people or the people like this is the reason that those, dramas are created, is that actually people were like that already? It's very interesting.
That I do not have an answer to because it is definitely the chicken or the egg situation. But I would say like, wouldn't it be like both, like people were like to some extent, and then the drama writers, which are mostly females, portray their fantasies in the dramas. And then those kind of reinforce themselves over the years, and then they become like, solid. Yeah.
Do you feel like I've listened to some of your podcasts and you've talked about the dynamics between the K-dramas and real life. There's obviously an expectation from foreign women, especially, is like if they come to Korea, that is going to happen. And you have mentioned just now that like women are getting love bombed and men will do all of those things naturally. But is there any like, I guess myths in the K-dramas? I'm sure there are, but
Yeah. First of all, do not expect men to be handsome like in the K-dramas. That is the first fallacy. Foreign women come to see, K-drama actors on the streets. You will not find that men all around the world are the same. There are average men. There are good-looking men. So K-dramas are not accurate representation of how we look. However, we might mirror maybe the style, like the way of dressing or the way we talk or like treat the women. So that would be slightly accurate, but still, like, you got to know that K-dramas are a fantasy after all. So like, it won't be to that level, of course. And also, I would say this is like my own personal advice. as I said, because there is a stigma upon dating apps and foreigners that come to seek like relationships here, their only place initially to go are dating apps because they don't have any friends here. They don't have anybody to introduce you. So they go on dating apps. But as I said, Korean men on dating apps tend to seek like very superficial or one-off relationships. And then the women that meet the men there will get very disappointed because of the discrepancy of what they saw in K-dramas and what they're seeing on Tinder. So I think that should be took into account, and they should be very cautious about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it is interesting, though, because now that you're in the US, maybe if you open up a dating app, you'll see that it's not just hookup based, right? Like, for us, like I'm in Canada, I mean, dating apps or even in Europe, it's not just for hookups. It's actually just to meet each other. I actually don't know how people meet in real life these days because it's just so hard. And I can imagine also in Seoul, it must be hard. Like it's a big metropolis, right? To actually run into someone on a bus stop while it's raining, it's probably, there's not a good chance, or there's too many people at a bus stop waiting for the bus for you to have a meet cute. We say it's a meet cute in American movies. It's like the cute meeting that you have with someone. It's probably what you mean with
chamansu.
Chamansu. Speaking of foreigners, what do Korean men think of foreign women? Let's start with, let's say, American women.
So definitely they would, the first assumption would be, no offense, that they are very open-minded and very, open towards like sexual relationships, for sure. Because as you mentioned before, Korea has been very conservative for a while. And then still, even until now, women are very like reserved and they don't want to get into bed that early. But like because of American media or Hollywood, all of that, what we see is like the man and the guy, man and the woman meet on their first date and they start making out. They, just like cut to the hotel scene and they're just making love on bed. So we're like, oh, that's how it is in the States, or that's how it is in Europe. And then we get a very, distorted image about women in general, Western women. So yeah, I think that is like the, very stereotypical, image we have about like foreign women in general. Other than that, I would say, because Korean women can be very like obsessive or like possessive towards their partners, we would assume that Westerners or like just foreign women in general are just cool about like what their partners are doing. Like they wouldn't obsess over, why aren't you texting me right now? Or like I'm at work. Like, so we have a mindset, we have a view upon like foreigners, that they'll accept my, what I'm doing right now. They'll respect my time. They won't be very like constraining and all that. Yeah, I think those two would be the biggest views.
Yeah, I love that you bring up these 2 points. The first one, because I knew you were going to say that. Like I knew you were going to say they think they're easy because for whatever reason, that seems to be the general consensus of a lot of the world, And I think I would say there's probably truth to that compared to, I don't know Korean women very well, but I would say there needs to be a certain amount of playing hard to get and, seduction involved into like actually getting her to agree to something. As you said, it's changing and there's, there are different types of women, but still, I think there's just less of an effort that I don't want to generalize all Western guys, but because I do focus on different cultures, but there's less of an effort that is being put by men in many parts of the world. Yeah. And it's because they know that women will go to bed with them very quickly. I focus a lot on Scandinavia, and that's definitely the thing there is like men really don't put in the effort as much as Korean men would. Because the equality, right? Women are like, you don't need to do all of that to get me to say yes, because I feel like I want to do it anyways. And I don't need to be kind of like seduced into it. But the second point that you raised, that's very, very interesting to me. I've heard this a lot that like Koreans, I don't know, I've heard it actually from both sides that like Korean men and Korean women tend to be very jealous and very possessive in relationships. And I found it so hard to believe because when I think of possessive and jealousy, I think of like Latin American countries, right? So for me, when I think of East Asia, I think of people that are just like more rational, able to contain themselves. So talk to me about that. It was one of the questions that I really wanted to ask you about the Korean jealousy, possessiveness. Is it from both sides? Is it men to women, women to men, or just women to men, you find?
It is both sides. They think, while cheating might be very common here, it is seen as, of course, very like a severe fault, and they want to prevent it at all costs. So I would say it's a little bit more extreme on the women's side because I don't want to generalize, but men tend to cheat a little bit more. I don't know if statistics can prove that, but yeah, there is a lot of jealousy from both sides. And I can only speak for myself because I'm a guy, but my ex-girlfriends or whoever I met in the past who were Korean, they were like, you need to text me at least like, it depends on the person, but like every 5 minutes or an hour or something like that. So if you don't text me, you're doing something else, like you don't love me. So texting and constant communication is a form of love to them. It's like validating and verifying that, oh, you are still interested in me. So we would go to the extent of like, we wake up, we say, good morning, did you sleep well? And then all the way to work, we are texting on like the metro and all that. And then we work a little bit. They can understand that. But even between, working hours, like there was this one case, I was meeting a person and I was having a very, very important meeting. And the meeting went on for 3 hours. And then after that, we got into a fight because she said, why didn't you text me for 3 hours? And I was like, I was in a very important meeting. And then she was like, but did you not go to the bathroom one single time? And then I was like, yeah, of course I went to the bathroom. And then, well, did you not have fingers when you were in the bathroom break? And then did you not take at least 2 or 3 minutes there? And I was like, of course, yeah. Then she was like, giving me the face, and she was like, the fact that you didn't think of me when you went to the bathroom break, and that it only takes 5 seconds literally to just say, oh, I'm in the middle of the meeting, I'll get back to you after 3 hours. You made me worried. I was just here all like imagining all these weird stuff. And it just spirals from that. And that is not even an extreme case. So that's one example. And people here just don't let other people like go to clubs or, nightlife areas. Like if you're with the opposite sex, like definitely no. You always have to have a friend together. And even so, like, even if you have like a same sex friend, like if there would be like an opposite sex friend, like hanging around in the group, the partner would be very, very jealous. And like, it'll be like, okay, I'll allow you to go on this, hangout this night, but you need to promise me that you text every 5 minutes. And, that's like somewhat of a norm here. And I know it's unbelievable, but yeah, it is. So
I'm literally listening to you like I'm shocked.
Yeah. So as I said, it differs upon person to person. Some people might be more lenient, but it is the general rule here that you need to have some sort of like constant communication. Yeah.
So checking in is a thing. So basically you need to start off, if you're in a relationship, it's expected, I suppose, that when you wake up, you say, good morning, baby. How did you sleep? Or what are you doing today? Right.
Yep.
Take some photos of, do you change? I mean, nowadays Facebook is not so much of a thing, but I would assume like back in the day, you need to change your status on Facebook. Because why are you hiding?
That would be a required thing. Yes.
Is there anything else that you need to do? Do you need to take like couples photos? Do you need to, I know wearing the matching outfits. I don't know if that's still a thing in Korea.
Well, yeah, that used to be a thing, but nowadays a lot of people think it's kind of cringy. So they wander off from that. Maybe like people in their early 20s would still do that out of fun. But yeah, as I said, it's kind of cringy. So they would do like matching outfits, but not identical outfits. Like, one person with a similar style, they would go with that look just for the fun of it. As you said, like if you're dating somebody, a girlfriend would usually say like, why don't you put me on your profile picture? Like, are you embarrassed of me? Or are you seeing somebody else than me? Like, just put it out there that you are taken, you're in a relationship. So that would be the case for a lot of like, social media, like Instagram, like put a photo of us on your feed so that somebody visits you, they know you're taken, stuff like that. So yeah, I think that is a common practice nowadays even. Mm-hmm.
And so like if you're on Instagram, would you say, without generalizing too much, is it common to just like go through Instagram and see who you're following? Did you message anybody? Is there kind of control over that as well?
Yeah, I don't think it's like that intense, but definitely there were cases, even personally as well, that the girlfriends would, go through the following list and see like who I'm following and like who's this girl, who's that girl. Like I need to like cross them out of my list. And then like she needs to check who I'm actually talking to. Like she wouldn't like steal my phone and look behind my back or anything. But if I am texting someone like in her presence, she would be like, oh, who's that? And then if it happens to be a female, I have to explain the whole story of like how I got to meet her. It's a business relationship, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it gets some intense at sometimes. Yeah.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that a lot of women say that Korean men tend to love bomb them. And I think maybe it's a direct result of the expectation that like in order to get with a woman, you need to do all these beautiful things. You need to constantly feed her attention. Otherwise, she's going to get pissed off essentially, right?
Yes.
So I think it's interesting. It's kind of, again, it's like women's expectation kind of they create men's behavior a lot of times, right? The men are like, how much work do I need to put into this to get there?
Exactly.
Okay, I need to love bomb the hell out of her. It is interesting. How do you feel about that personally? Like in a relationship, does it get exhausting for you to constantly be in touch with your partner?
Yes. So as I have been like influenced by other cultures and I've heard different perspectives, of course, it gets very tiring for me. So nowadays, after dating for like 10 years, ever since 20, I've grown a preference towards women who are less clingy and less like possessive. So that's one of the like red flags or like things I look when I meet someone on the first date. Like I ask them, so what's your tendency to, text, how do you care about that much? Like, I'm a very busy person. If I'm out of reach, how would you react to that? Like hypothetical situations. And I try to get her like, her character. And if it doesn't match with me, I'm like, I can't do this. So I think a lot of men have been feeling the exhaust as well in general. So yeah, that has been a trend. So people are like, this is a little bit too much.
Yeah, I do find it exhausting. I think I had a conversation actually on a podcast with a Brazilian friend of mine, and it was quite similar when it came to Brazil. And we talked about the fact that for me personally, I don't know how you feel about it. A certain distance is necessary to feel more attracted and to miss the person more. Because I feel like when something is enforced on you, it feels like work, and it's not a natural emotion. It's like oh no, I have to text this person. Uh-huh. And that's when you start losing emotions for this person, because then you just feel like it's not my mother. Like, why do I have to check in all the time? You know what I mean? It just feels like I'm being controlled. And so I feel like women doing that, they're actually giving the opposite effect. So if you want to cheat on her, you will cheat on her. Yes. You can take those 2 hours. You can still text her, I mean, do they really think that by controlling someone in that way that they're going to avoid unfaithful? And actually, in fact, I think it's going to be more, someone's going to want to like release those chains and do something wild, right? Because it just feels so suffocating when you're in a relationship with someone who like constantly needs the attention.
That is true. But for some reason, a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Like, that's why I love learning about cultures. Because I've never been to Korea. I don't know too much about the culture. I would never have assumed that Korea would be that jealous, but I've heard it so many times. And actually, I started to get curious, and then I heard you talk about it on your podcast as well. So I realized, okay, it definitely is a thing. Apparently, like women to men more. And then when it comes to men, is there a tendency to be more jealous and possessive? You mentioned not as much, right?
Yes, for sure. It goes vice versa the same way, but I would say like the tendency or the intensiveness goes down a little bit. I think men just want to be careful of the big things. Like, for example, they check on whether their girlfriends are going to a club, with their, I've heard a lot of foreigners say they have a thing called girls' night out. Like they go to like clubs together with their, female buddies. And that thing would be very wrong or like it wouldn't happen in Korea. Like if you're in a relationship, it would have to go through a very, very hard procedure of convincing the boyfriend. Like, for example, if my girlfriend said, "Oh, I want to go to the club tonight," when we're dating, and then I'm like, "Who are you going with?" I'm going with, like, I don't know, Marina today. Then I would be like, "But why? Like, you have a boyfriend, why would you go to the club?" Because the club also has an image of like meeting people, and, hooking up and all that kind of stuff. And there are going to be like these wolves trying to like approach her and stuff. So yeah, people get really protective over that. And it extends to just casual meetings with like the opposite sex or, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So then if your relationship, you're assumed to be doing everything together.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unless you're going to the bathroom or going to work or doing all those things that you need to do for survival purposes.
Yes.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I think it's interesting for me, like finding out about cultures and the extreme cases of that. Like you've telling me this. And for me, it's definitely very different than a lot of the countries around the world. But I've seen the opposite ends of that, where people are like, no, we're like, let me do my own thing and don't ask me why as well, which I also find, I feel like it's nice to have a balance of like, no, I'm able to trust you. I know that you're going out to dance. I know that if you were looking to hook up, then you wouldn't be in a relationship with me. Or if that's still your thing, then why are we still in a relationship, right?
Yes.
Like, I would assume that that's enough of a reason not to look for someone, right? Yeah. Like if the only reason you're not cheating is because you don't have a choice, you don't have the chance to do it, there's something wrong with the relationship itself.
That is correct.
But yeah, it would be great to get a Korean girl on the podcast to hear her side of it. Maybe it would be interesting for me. David, what is for foreigners? Or actually, let me ask you another question. For gender roles, is there an expectation that the man basically like pays throughout the relationship, that he's buying, nice gifts, cute little things, carrying her bags? Is there an expectation of that?
Everything you mentioned, there are expectations for that. For the first date, definitely the man pays. Usually for the more expensive meal, the man pays. Nowadays, it's getting better. Like women are, they're like, oh, I can pay for that as well. And so people are like trying to like level it out, but still there are definitely expectations for that. And men also seem to, of course they're sore about it to some level, but they accept it. They're like, okay, I need to put this much effort into like a woman to actually get her interest and date her and all that. So I think, they have a consensus on those terms. And most of the times too, like I've seen a lot of cases where the guy would be a little bit older than the girl and then would be a little bit more well off in terms of salary or earnings. And then he would assume like, okay, since I earn more, like I'll just like, buy her a good meal or, pay for most of the stuff. And that would be a very common case. So yeah, I've seen a lot of cases like that.
Speaking of age, if you are dating someone older, is there a thing with not being able to say their name, or it's like the way you refer to them should be very respectful? Is there not?
No. Within like a relationship, I don't think there needs to be any like respect towards like what you're doing to an elder or a stranger. But there are like different terms you would call, so like in Korea, if you're like an older, male than the female, there is a term called oppa. And this is, so if I were meeting someone younger than me, she would call me oppa, like David oppa. And a lot of Western media has kind of weirded out that term into like a Korea-boo thing. But still, that is like how they call us. And if I were to meet like an older girl, I would call her Nuna and stuff like that. So besides those terms, I don't think there's like a code of respect or how you should act. Yeah, because of age. Yeah.
Okay. Before I forget it, let's talk about skinship.
Okay.
What is that?
Skinship is just like touching each other. I mean, that sounds weird, but like literally it's like you grabbing hands, like holding hands. And also it extends to even sex. So everything related to physical intimacy would be called as skinship. Yeah.
And is there any rule about when that should happen within a relationship?
So this differs from person to person, but usually, I wouldn't say usually even now, because like so much has changed. But back in the days when I was started to dating in like the early 2010s or whatever, yeah, there would be like a general rule, like you meet at least 3 dates and then you start holding hands. And then one side has to like say, do you want to be my girlfriend? And then if she accepts, you label each other. And then you go on to like kissing. And then a certain amount of time would have to pass, like, let's say 100 days or like 2 months or something like that. And then you usually go on a trip and then it gets romantic and you have sex and all that. So that used to be how it looked like in the old days. But nowadays, after a decade, with the Gen Z and all, they're like, okay, we don't need anything like that. We could just make out just on the get-go. We could just go to, a love motel right now, or like holding hands is nothing for them anymore. It's just like, it's a form of affection. Yeah.
Damn Gen Z.
Yes.
Changing all the rules.
Yes.
Yeah, they're also making this process of like discovering cultures less exciting because they're just like copying everything from the US. So it's all becoming very, very similar around the world.
Yes,
which I find a little bit boring. Now, okay, so skinship. It's an interesting term because like I don't think there is any term like that, at least not that I know of. Like in the English language, there isn't anything. So it's interesting that you guys actually have a term for that, and there used to be rules around that, but again, yeah, like. Not anymore. David, for foreigners that are coming to Korea, is there anything to kind of keep in mind, or is there anything that would surprise them, would make it difficult? What do you think?
So I think we've all discussed it before, but definitely they have different expectations towards foreigners, unfortunately. So they would think you're more easy. And definitely dating apps are not the most optimal best places to meet Korean men, because the men over there have, very motivated, very bad motives there. So yeah, those would be the two things I would watch out for. And I would say, like, if you want to meet a Korean guy or like a Korean girl, the best way to do it is like become friends with a certain group first, or like go out to like a group or like a running club or whatever, a book club. And then meet in natural settings and like build up from there. Then you'll have the higher chance of meeting a more genuine person, a person who's more sincere towards relationship, and you won't get ending up hurt. So I think that would be my biggest advice. Other than that, just don't believe what you see on K-drama is all true, like especially the appearances and all sorts of like these love bombing things. Like, it's going to differ from person to person. Not everybody's like a K-drama actor. So yeah, that would be it.
Yeah, thank you. That's solid advice. Well, David, thank you so much for taking part in the podcast. Guys, if you want to check out David's podcast, it's actually really cool. I really like the concept of having a few people on the board panel kind of to discuss it, because then you get so many different perspectives. Even within the same culture, you get to discover a lot. So if you want to check it out, I'm going to link to it all below, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.